In the vast emptiness of the South Pacific, where the nearest landmass lies over 1,000 miles away, there exists a cluster of islands so remote that their population could fit inside a single city block. Yet, within this isolation, this profound separation from the rest of humanity, lies one of Earth's most extraordinary stories of survival, beauty, and raw natural power, the Pitcairn Islands. 4 volcanic remnants scattered across an ocean so blue it seems to absorb the very sky itself. Here, towering sea cliffs plunge into waters that have remained unchanged for millennia. Ancient Polynesian temples stand silent among forests where no human foot has walked for generations. Coral gardens bloom in underwater cathedrals that rival anything on land. And at the center of it all, a community of fewer than 50 souls maintains a way of life that exists nowhere else on Earth. This is not just about remoteness. It's about what happens when nature reclaims its throne. When evolution runs wild in isolation, when human history crystallizes into something pure and uncompromising, these islands hold secrets that challenge everything we think we know about survival, beauty, and the delicate balance between civilization and wilderness. Today, we're embarking on a journey to the edge of the world. 12 wonders that prove distance doesn't diminish beauty, it concentrates it. From volcanic sculptures that dwarf cathedrals to underwater forests that glow with their own light, from the last pure gene pools on Earth to archaeological mysteries that rewrite Pacific history. Welcome to the Pitcairn Islands, where isolation doesn't mean empty, it means extraordinary. Countdown. Number 12. The Tedside Cliffs. Rising nearly 1,100 feet straight from the Pacific's churning waters, the Tedside Cliffs represent nature's most dramatic architectural statement. These are not gentle slopes or rolling hills. They are vertical walls of volcanic rock that seem to have been carved by some cosmic sculptor working on an impossible scale. The basalt here tells a story written in stone, each layer marking a different eruption, a different moment when the Earth's molten heart burst through the ocean floor. Standing at the edge, the sensation is overwhelming. The wind carries the salt spray up from waves that have traveled thousands of miles to crash against these ancient guardians. Below, the Pacific stretches endlessly, its deep blue gradually fading into the lighter azure of the horizon. On clear days, you can see the curvature of the Earth itself, a reminder that you're standing on one of the most isolated pieces of land on the planet. But the Tedside Cliffs aren't just about height and drama, they're an ecosystem unto themselves. Frigate birds nest in the impossible ledges, their massive wingspans allowing them to ride the updrafts that surge along the cliff face. Red-footed boobies dive from these heights with precision that would make a fighter pilot envious, plunging into the depths to emerge with fish that flash silver in the sunlight. The geology here is extraordinary. The cliffs reveal millions of years of volcanic activity, with different colored strata marking different eruptions. Iron-rich deposits create streaks of rust red that contrast dramatically with the deep black of the basalt. When the late afternoon sun hits these walls, they transform into a canvas of colors that shift and change with every passing cloud. Henderson Island exists in a state of pristine isolation that's almost impossible to comprehend in our modern world. This 14-square-mile coral atoll has remained virtually untouched by human presence, creating what UNESCO has recognized as one of the world's best examples of elevated coral reef ecosystems. Here, evolution has been allowed to run its course without interference, resulting in a living laboratory that's both beautiful and scientifically invaluable. The island's interior is a maze of fossilized coral formations that have been lifted hundreds of feet above sea level by geological forces. These ancient reefs have created a landscape that looks almost alien. Sharp pinnacles of white limestone pierce through dense vegetation, while hidden caves and crevices harbor species found nowhere else on Earth. The Henderson fruit dove, with its iridescent green plumage, represents one of the purest examples of island endemism, having evolved in complete isolation for thousands of years. Walking through Henderson's interior is like stepping into a natural cathedral. The forest canopy filters the sunlight into dappled patterns that dance across the forest floor. The silence is profound, broken only by the distant crash of waves against the coral ramparts that guard the island's perimeter. This is nature in its most concentrated form, where every tree, every bird, every insect has adapted to a world that exists nowhere else. The marine environment surrounding Henderson is equally spectacular. The coral reefs here represent some of the last pristine examples of Pacific coral ecosystems, with giant clams that can live for over a century and reef fish whose colors seem to defy natural law. The water clarity is extraordinary. Visibility often exceeds 200 feet, allowing you to see the entire underwater landscape spread out below like a living map. Bounty Bay carries within its protected waters one of the most famous stories in maritime history. This small harbor, carved into Pitcairn's rugged coastline, was where the HMS Bounty mutineers made their final landfall in 1790, burning their ship and beginning one of the most extraordinary survival stories in human history. But beyond its historical significance, Bounty Bay is a masterpiece of natural engineering, a perfect harbor formed by volcanic activity and carved by centuries of Pacific storms. The bay's entrance is narrow and treacherous, guarded by jagged rocks that have claimed countless vessels over the centuries. Yet, once inside, the waters are calm and protected, creating a natural sanctuary that has sheltered generations of islanders. The harbor walls rise dramatically on three sides, covered in vegetation that cascades right down to the water's edge. Norfolk pines, introduced by the early settlers, tower above the native vegetation, their straight trunks reaching toward the sky like natural monuments. The water in Bounty Bay is remarkably clear, with visibility that allows you to see the rocky bottom even in the deeper sections. Schools of tropical fish move through the harbor like living clouds, their scales catching the light that filters down through the crystal-clear water. The harbor's protected nature has created a unique ecosystem where juvenile fish can mature safely before venturing into the open ocean. At the harbor's head, the remains of the original settlement are still visible. Stone foundations mark where the mutineers built their first shelters, while the descendants of their original gardens still grow wild along the shoreline. The juxtaposition of human history and natural beauty is really profound. This small bay has witnessed the complete arc of human settlement, from desperate survival to thriving community. Number 9. Ducie Island Seabird Sanctuary. Ducie Island represents one of the most important seabird sanctuaries in the entire Pacific Ocean. This low-lying coral atoll, just 2 miles long and half a mile wide, supports populations of seabirds that number in the hundreds of thousands. The island's isolation has made it a crucial breeding ground for species that range across the entire Pacific, from Murphy's petrels to masked boobies, each using Ducie as their ancestral home base. During breeding season, the island transforms into a living carpet of birds. The ground is covered with nests, while the air above is filled with the constant movement of parents returning from feeding runs that can extend hundreds of miles into the open ocean. The cacophony of calls creates a symphony that can be heard from miles away, while the visual spectacle of thousands of birds taking flight simultaneously creates clouds that temporarily block the sun. The island's coral structure provides perfect nesting conditions. The porous limestone creates natural chambers and overhangs that protect nests from the elements, while the flat interior provides space for ground nesting species. The surrounding waters are incredibly productive, with upwelling currents bringing nutrients that support the massive fish populations that feed the seabirds. From the air, Ducie appears as a perfect green ring surrounding a turquoise lagoon. The contrast between the white coral beaches, the deep blue of the surrounding ocean, and the vibrant green of the vegetation creates a color palette that seems almost artificially enhanced. The lagoon itself is a wonder, completely enclosed and filled with water so clear that the bottom details are visible even from considerable height. Number 8. The underwater forests of Eno Island. Surrounding the tiny coral atoll of Eno Island lies one of the most extraordinary underwater forests in the Pacific. Here, massive kelp formations create submarine cathedrals that rival any terrestrial forest in their beauty and ecological complexity. These aren't the kelp forests of colder waters, they're tropical kelp species that have adapted to the warm Pacific currents, creating underwater landscapes that are both familiar and utterly alien. The kelp fronds reach toward the surface like the arms of submerged trees, their brown and gold colors creating a canopy that filters the sunlight into moving patterns of light and shadow. Swimming through these underwater forests is like flying through an alien world, where gravity seems suspended and every movement creates ripples that travel through the water like visible sound waves. The silence is profound, broken only by the gentle sound of water moving through the kelp fronds and the distant calls of marine life. The biodiversity within these forests is extraordinary. Tropical fish species that are rare elsewhere in the Pacific are common here, their colors made even more vibrant by the filtered light. Giant moray eels move through the kelp like sea serpents, while schools of jackfish create living tornadoes that spiral through the water column. The interplay between the stationary kelp and the mobile marine life creates a dynamic ecosystem that changes constantly. The water clarity around Ueno is legendary among divers. Visibility often exceeds 300 feet, allowing you to see the entire underwater landscape spread out in all directions. The kelp forests extend far beyond what the eye can encompass, creating the impression of an underwater continent that exists in a world completely separate from the surface. Number 7. Pitcairn's ancient Polynesian temples. Hidden within Pitcairn's dense interior forests stand the remains of some of the most remote Polynesian temples in the Pacific. These stone structures, called marae, were built by the original Polynesian inhabitants centuries before the arrival of the Bounty mutineers. They represent one of the most easterly examples of Polynesian ceremonial architecture, marking the absolute edge of ancient Polynesian expansion into the Pacific. The largest of these temples, known as the Great Marae, consists of precisely fitted basalt stones that have been arranged in complex patterns that align with astronomical events. The engineering required to move these massive stones through the dense forest and position them with such precision speaks to a sophisticated understanding of both construction and astronomy. The stones themselves have been weathered by centuries of tropical storms, but their arrangement remains intact, creating a connection to the island's pre-European past that is both tangible and profound. The temples are surrounded by the descendants of the original Polynesian plantings, breadfruit trees, taro and other crops that have gone wild in the centuries since the original population disappeared. The forest has reclaimed much of the surrounding area, but the temples themselves remain clear, as if the vegetation recognizes their sacred nature. The contrast between the precise human construction and the wild natural growth creates a powerful visual statement about the relationship between civilization and nature. Standing within these ancient structures, you can feel the weight of history. These stones were placed by people who had traveled thousands of miles across open ocean using only the stars for navigation. They represent the furthest reach of one of humanity's greatest maritime civilizations, the final point where Polynesian culture touched the edge of the known world. Number 6. The Crystal Caves of Pitcairn. Deep within Pitcairn's volcanic interior, a network of crystal caves creates one of the most spectacular underground landscapes in the Pacific. These caves were formed by ancient lava flows that created hollow chambers as the molten rock cooled, and over millennia, mineral-rich water has deposited layers of crystals that transform the caves into natural cathedrals of light and color. The entrance to the main cave system is hidden within a grove of native trees, marked only by a cool breeze that carries the scent of deep earth and mineral water. As you descend into the cave system, the temperature drops noticeably, and the sound of the outside world fades into a profound silence that's broken only by the occasional drip of water and the echo of your own footsteps. The caves themselves are extraordinary. The walls are covered in crystal formations that range from delicate needle-like structures to massive cathedral-like formations that rise from the cave floor like frozen waterfalls. When light is introduced into these chambers, the crystals come alive, refracting and reflecting the illumination into patterns that seem to move and dance. The mineral content of the water has created crystals in colors that span the entire spectrum, from pure white calcite to deep purple amethyst, with formations that appear to glow with their own internal light. And just when you think it can't get better, wait until you see number 1. Number 5. The Floating Gardens of Tedside. At the base of Pitcairn's dramatic Tedside cliffs, where freshwater springs meet the Pacific's edge, an extraordinary ecosystem has developed. Floating gardens of marine plants that create one of the most unusual and beautiful landscapes in the Pacific. These aren't typical seaweed beds, but rather complex formations of marine vegetation that have adapted to the unique conditions where fresh water meets salt water, creating a buoyant ecosystem that literally floats on the ocean's surface. The gardens are most spectacular during the early morning hours when the water is calm and the plants create a carpet of green that extends for hundreds of yards along the coastline. The vegetation consists of multiple species of marine plants that have evolved to take advantage of the nutrient-rich fresh water that flows from the cliff face, while still tolerating the salt water of the ocean. The result is a hybrid ecosystem that exists nowhere else on Earth. The marine life within these floating gardens is extraordinary. Fish species that are typically found in freshwater environments coexist with purely marine species, creating a biodiversity that challenges traditional ecological boundaries. The plants themselves provide shelter and food for a complex web of marine life, from tiny invertebrates to larger fish that move through the gardens like visitors in an underwater park. The visual impact of the floating gardens is profound. From above, they appear as patches of vibrant green floating on the deep blue of the Pacific, while from water level, they create a maze of channels and clearings that you can navigate by kayak or small boat. The contrast between the floating vegetation and the towering cliffs behind creates a landscape that seems to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. If this journey has already left you breathless, hit that subscribe button. We're only halfway through, and the wonders ahead will redefine what you thought possible in such a remote corner of our planet. Number 4. The bioluminescent bays of Henderson. When darkness falls over Henderson Island, the protected bays along its eastern shore transform into one of nature's most magical spectacles. The waters here contain some of the highest concentrations of bioluminescent organisms in the Pacific, creating a light show that rivals any aurora. This isn't just a simple glow, it's a complex ecosystem of light-producing organisms that have evolved to communicate, hunt, and survive using their own biological illumination. The bioluminescence is caused by dinoflagellates, microscopic organisms that emit light when disturbed. But the concentrations here are extraordinary. Millions of these organisms per cubic meter of water create a density of light that makes the water itself seem alive. When you move through the water, whether swimming, kayaking, or simply trailing your hand from a boat, you create trails of blue-green light that follow your movements like liquid lightning. The light show is most spectacular during the new moon phases when the natural darkness allows the bioluminescence to shine at its brightest. Fish moving through the water create their own light trails, while larger marine animals like rays and sharks appear as ghostly silhouettes surrounded by halos of living light. The effect is so intense that it's possible to read by the light generated by the water itself. The scientific significance of these bioluminescent bays cannot be overstated. They represent one of the most concentrated examples of this phenomenon in the entire Pacific, and their isolation has allowed the organisms to evolve without the pollution and disruption that has diminished bioluminescence in other parts of the world. The water quality here is so pristine that the organisms can thrive in concentrations that would be impossible in more populated areas. Number 3. The vertical farms of Pitcairn. Carved into the steep slopes of Pitcairn's volcanic hills, the islanders have created one of the most ingenious agricultural systems in the Pacific. These vertical farms, known locally as garden terraces, transform the island's challenging topography into productive agricultural land, while creating a landscape that appears to defy gravity itself. The terraces climb the hillsides like natural staircases, each level supporting different crops adapted to the specific conditions of elevation and exposure. The construction of these terraces required generations of work, with each level carefully engineered to capture and channel rainwater while preventing erosion. The retaining walls are built from local volcanic stone, fitted together with precision that would impress any modern engineer. The soil itself has been carefully cultivated over centuries, with organic matter added to create growing medium that can support the island's food production in an environment where every square foot of arable land is precious. The crops grown on these terraces represent a unique blend of Polynesian, European, and tropical species. Traditional taro and breadfruit grow alongside vegetables introduced by the bounty mutineers, while tropical fruits like passion fruit and papaya cascade down the hillsides. The visual effect is extraordinary. The terraces create patterns of green that follow the natural contours of the hills while creating geometric designs that are visible from miles away. The agricultural techniques used here have evolved to take advantage of the island's unique microclimate. Each terrace level receives different amounts of sunlight and rainfall, allowing for crop rotation and specialization that maximizes productivity. The system is entirely organic, with composting and natural pest control methods that have been refined over generations of island living. Number 2. The coral cathedrals of Ducie Atoll. Beneath the waters surrounding Ducie Atoll lies one of the most pristine coral reef systems in the entire Pacific Ocean. These underwater formations have earned the name coral cathedrals because of their extraordinary size and architectural complexity. The reef structures rise from the deep ocean floor like natural skyscrapers, with coral formations that tower hundreds of feet above the seafloor and create chambers and passages that rival any human construction. The coral diversity here is staggering. Over 200 species of hard and soft corals have been identified, many of which exist nowhere else in the Pacific. The isolation of Ducey has allowed these coral communities to evolve without the pressures of human development or climate change impacts that have affected other Pacific reefs. The result is a coral ecosystem that represents what Pacific reefs looked like before human influence began to alter ocean chemistry and temperature. The visual impact of these coral cathedrals is overwhelming. The formations create underwater landscapes that extend beyond the limits of vision, with coral towers connected by bridges and arches that seem to have been designed by some underwater architect. The colors are extraordinary. Brilliant oranges, deep purples, electric blues, and vibrant yellows create a palette that seems too vivid to be real. When sunlight penetrates the water, it creates beams of light that illuminate the coral formations like natural spotlights. The marine life within these coral cathedrals is equally spectacular. Schools of fish move through the structures like living clouds, their scales catching the filtered sunlight and creating flashes of silver and gold. Giant grouper, some weighing over 400 pounds, patrol the deeper sections of the reef, while smaller tropical species create moving carpets of color that shift and change with every current. The reef sharks that call these formations home are magnificent predators that glide through the water with the grace of underwater birds of prey. Number 1. Adams Rock, the volcanic spire. Rising 1,800 feet directly from the Pacific's depths, Adams Rock stands as the ultimate symbol of Pitcairn's volcanic birth and the raw power that created these islands. This massive volcanic spire, the hardened core of an ancient volcano, represents one of the most dramatic geological formations in the entire Pacific. It's not just a rock. It's a monument to the incredible forces that lifted these islands from the ocean floor and a testament to the beauty that can emerge from the Earth's most violent processes. The rock itself is composed of highly resistant basalt that has withstood millions of years of Pacific storms, creating a formation that appears to have been carved by some cosmic sculptor. The sheer faces of the rock are broken by ledges and crevices that support unique ecosystems, plants and animals that have adapted to life on these vertical walls hundreds of feet above the ocean. The rock's surface changes color throughout the day, from deep black in the early morning to rich browns and reds as the sun reaches its zenith, and finally to purple and violet as the day ends. The geological significance of Adams Rock cannot be overstated. It represents the original volcanic plug that formed the foundation of the entire Pitcairn Island chain. The rock's composition tells the story of the hotspot volcanism that created these islands, with mineral formations that record the temperature and pressure conditions deep within the Earth's mantle. Geologists consider it one of the most important volcanic formations in the Pacific, a textbook example of how oceanic islands are born from the planet's molten core. The ecosystem that has developed around Adams Rock is extraordinary. The rock creates its own microclimate with wind patterns and rain shadows that support species found nowhere else in the Pitcairn chain. Seabirds nest on the impossible ledges, while marine life congregates in the deep waters at the rock's base, attracted by the upwelling currents that bring nutrients from the deep ocean. The rock serves as a navigational landmark that can be seen from over 30 miles away, a beacon that has guided sailors across the Pacific for centuries. The spiritual and cultural significance of Adams Rock to the Pitcairn community is profound. It represents the permanence and strength of their island home, a reminder that even in the most isolated places on Earth, natural forces can create beauty that rivals anything human civilization has ever achieved. The rock has witnessed the entire human history of the islands, from the first Polynesian settlers to the bounty mutineers, to the modern island community that calls Pitcairn home. From the rock's base, looking up at its impossible height, you're confronted with the raw power of geological forces and the incredible beauty that can emerge from the Earth's most fundamental processes. This is nature at its most dramatic and most beautiful, a single formation that encapsulates everything that makes the Pitcairn Islands extraordinary: their isolation, their volcanic birth, their unique ecosystems, and their ability to create profound beauty in the most remote corner of our planet. The Pitcairn Islands are more than just a collection of remote Pacific atolls. They represent something fundamental about our planet's capacity for beauty and life in the most unlikely places. These 12 wonders, scattered across thousands of square miles of empty ocean, prove that isolation doesn't mean insignificance. Instead, it creates concentration, intensity, and a purity of natural processes that has become increasingly rare in our connected world. Each wonder tells part of a larger story about survival, adaptation, and the incredible diversity that can emerge when nature is allowed to run its course without interference. From the towering volcanic spires that mark the island's violent birth, to the delicate coral gardens that represent millions of years of biological cooperation, these islands demonstrate that the most beautiful places on Earth are often the most isolated and challenging to reach. The Pitcairn Islands remind us that our planet still holds secrets, still maintains places where the primary relationship is between life and the raw forces of nature, rather than between life and human civilization. In a world where true wilderness is becoming increasingly rare, these islands stand as a testament to what Earth looked like before human influence began to shape every ecosystem and every landscape. The 47 people who call Pitcairn home are not just residents, they are guardians of something irreplaceable. Their daily lives unfold against backdrops of natural beauty that would be considered extraordinary anywhere else in the world, but which for them represent the normal rhythms of island existence. They live within these wonders, not as tourists or visitors, but as integral parts of ecosystems that have evolved over millions of years. Perhaps most importantly, the Pitcairn Islands prove that distance and isolation don't diminish importance, they concentrate it. Every species, every geological formation, every ecosystem here represents something that exists nowhere else on Earth. In our interconnected world, these islands stand as reminders that the most profound experiences often come from the most remote places, and that true beauty isn't about convenience or accessibility, it's about the willingness to journey to the edge of the world to witness wonders that, honestly, few humans will ever see. If this journey amazed you, subscribe and share it with someone who loves discovery. Some places you visit, others stay with you forever. Until the next destination, stay curious.